Hey everybody, what's going on? Helllight here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk a little bit more about lore of League of Legends and what the future of it could look like. I know this is a particular pet subject of mine, but I've been playing a lot of Legends of Runeterra recently, and with the new set coming out and kind of sort of giving us more hints at the eventual return of Noxus to Ionian Shores, I feel like it's a good time to kind of talk about ways in which Riot can add lore back into League of Legends itself, because Legends of Runeterra obviously has the advantage of being sort of diverse from needing a very strict gameplay sense. Obviously, Runeterra is more focused around combat and things like that, so it does skew in that regard to what Riot are willing to show on cards. Obviously, all these units need to be able to fight each other. That's why they're here, so you're not going to see a lot of units, hanging out, cooking bread, and, chilling with their friends. That's not the kind of thing you're going to see in Legends of Runeterra. But either way, it does a good job of sort of showing us the world of Runeterra as opposed to League of Legends, which is mostly about the League of Legends, right? The legendary heroes, the characters that are sort of stand apart from everyone else. Runeterra is the everyman's game. But despite this, and I know League of Legends has already sort of divorced itself from the canon in its entirety, right? Nothing that happens in a game of League of Legends is intended to be canon. None of these characters meeting each other, or even Summoner's Rift or Summoners in the first place, right? None of that is technically canon at all. So in that regard, it's sort of the question is, well, what can you even do in a game like League where it's just 10 champions beating the crap out of each other endlessly, game after game after game? And I don't expect League of Legends to be the primary vessel for storytelling, nor do I expect Legends of Runeterra to be a primary vessel for storytelling. That's not what those games are designed to do. I think Riot has other opportunities to tell the full stories that they so choose, but I also think that Riot are currently underserving the amount of things they can do in order to actually tell stories in the universe that they've created with League of Legends. I do feel like they've kind of just sort of dropped the ball by saying, oh, well, nothing that happens in League is canon, so why are we worrying about the story at all? And I think that's sort of doing the game an injustice as to things that they can do. So that said, I've kind of compiled a list of a few things that I would like to see Riot maybe look at in terms of doing more lore content in League of Legends itself. First off, more story events. I think that was sort of an obvious one coming, and no one should be surprised I'm citing it, but if you guys were around for the Burning Tides event that happened, I believe, back in 2006, 2007, somewhere around there, or sorry, 2016, I should say, not 2006, that would be before the game was even out, but 2016, right? That event was huge. I feel like almost every player remembers Burning Tides and remembers, more importantly, the story elements that came with it. This was, yeah, sort of just a funsy event, but I feel like a lot of players, more than ever, had sort of an impression of what the story was about and what was happening in it and what characters were involved, and had an impression of how the story was even advancing when Gangplank, for example, was disabled for a couple of days, which a lot of players weren't happy about, so Riot may not pull the trigger on doing that in the future, but the whole point being is that this event was a huge deal for sort of not only developing the lore, but also helping a lot of players understand that there was development happening, that there was sort of a story going on. And the biggest thing for me about events like these is I know they take a lot of resources for Riot to put together, but they're hugely impactful in how they help develop the story and how they bring a lot of sort of player recognition and player understanding of what the story is about to the forefront of everyone's mind. I think that's a huge deal for sort of being able to say, hey guys, this is what is going down in the actual universe. This is what these characters are actually up to. And players sort of being able to realize for the first time without having to go to a place like Universe, oh, okay, I sort of get it. And, I think we all kind of even can consider the implications of what Burning Tides did for the story, right? This was a major development that pushed things forward. This took TF and Graves from mortal enemies to actually back to being partners. This allowed Miss Fortune to get revenge on Gangplank for murdering her parents and stealing the guns or breaking the guns from her mom. He didn't end up stealing them. And even afterwards, right, spent even more time sort of developing things from that point on, right? They weren't content to just say, okay, yeah, we did the thing in Burning Tides and that's it. Then we continued to get development with the Shadow Lingers story that came out later in the same year. When Alawi came out, she was sort of an addition onto both Shadow Lingers and the Burning Tides story. Even the most recent Bilgewater cinematic we got with Twisted Fate and Graves fighting together against Misfortune, that all has implications from things that happened back in Burning Tides. So I would love to see more story events like this happen. Again, it's a ton of work to do, but it's a very, very powerful tool in their toolbox, and especially if they're able to put together something like the Spirit Blossom event, which was a sort of similar degree of commitment and a similar sort of undertaking for Riot to put together, they can definitely scrape together something else and do more content like Burning Tides, but for actual in-game, or in-universe canon events, especially something like the eventual return of the Noxus-Ionia War. I think that would be a huge opportunity for Riot to do a big, splashy, story-based event like Burning Tides, and I think it would be a bit of a mistake for them to not go for something like that, for them to sort of let that pass by and say, yeah, it's happening now, but like we're not going to do anything big for it. That would be such a wasted opportunity, and I would love to see them do a Burning Tide style event for such a big lore event. That's not the only one, but I think it's the biggest one that's kind of on the forefront of everyone's mind, considering where the most recent Runeterra expansion is at. So besides that, though, obviously, like I said, there's a limit to what Riot can do in League of Legends itself. Obviously, we do have Riot Forge games, which do help, but just in general, I feel like those are sort of limited in the fact that they aren't Riot games, so the canonicity of things that happen in these games may be called into question. And again, it's sort of, a lot more people play League of Legends. This is how they were introduced to the game itself. They may not want to learn another game, even if it's a single-player story, right? A lot of people were drawn to this game because it's multiplayer, but that doesn't mean they can't enjoy the story in and of itself. So even though I know that, like, Riot Forge exists, and Riot Forge is going to do a lot for storytelling, I am a little hesitant, especially given that since obviously releases have already not gone according to plan, we're still waiting on the first Riot Forge game that's intended to have sort of story elements to it, and it's sort of unclear as, the unreleased Echo game, for example, how is that going to affect plot, right? Is that just a game set in the League of Legends universe that's going to have no effect on the plot at all, or will it? Or, there's a lot of sort of questions we have about it, so that, I get that that's sort of a consideration, well, Hell Knight, what about Riot Forge? But I don't really consider that as being a possibility here, and that's not really what I'm talking about. So I did want to make that clarity real quick here. But moving on from there are a lot smaller events as well, or smaller things that Riot can do to help sort of at least add a narrative flair, or to at least get people sort of interested or talking about the universe outside of just doing big splashy gameplay events or writing a lot of stories. I know Riot do those, but those are sort of inaccessible to a lot of players. I know some people really don't like reading. Some people will see stories and just not even bother clicking on them because why is that relevant, right? I'm here to play the game. But there's some smaller things you can do in-game that can still draw attention to the flavor of your game and get people interested without having to make them read through paragraphs like myself. I like doing it, but I know it's not for everybody. The easiest way to do it is to make story obvious through things like gameplay interactions, which I know they do a lot of, even though they're very rare and hard to trigger in games sometimes, but at least having the interactions is a good way of doing it, and I hope Riot do continue to do them. I know they backed away a little bit. It used to feel like we got a ton of interactions, and now we kind of get a handful with the characters that the champion is most associated with, but especially going forward, if Riot have characters in the booth reenacting their roles, especially with like Malphite, for example, who was recently in the booth for the Legends of Runeterra content, I would have loved it if they re-recorded Malphite's voice while they already had him there, and they were able to add in some of those Malphite interactions into Runeterra, or into League of Legends, right? Like, that would have been a really cool thing for them to do. Even smaller tidbits like adding flavor text to items that players buy in games. Now, by flavor text, I mean this is text that isn't relevant to the actual use of the item itself, but instead is just intended to give a picture as to what this item might do in the universe, or where this item might be found in the universe. Something like showing, the BF sword was clearly Demacian and Make, and having some line of flavor text that, like, it's a favorite of the Dauntless Vanguard, right? Like, this is what every Dauntless Vanguard member starts with when they first get added, right? Like, that would be even a little tiny line of text like that is enough to help sort of explain the story and give players an idea about that everything that's in the game does have some degree of connection to the actual universe, even if what's happening in the game isn't canon, but at least saying, okay, yeah, Victor isn't actually fighting Zed right now in a place called Summoner's Rift, but Victor exists, and here's how he might fight, and Zed exists, and here's how he might fight, and these are the items that exist in the universe and what kind of things they do in the universe, right? That kind of a thing I think would be really interesting way of sort of showing off the story and showing off, how things are sort of intended to work in the place of Runeterra itself. It's also easy enough to do things like more gameplay events, which I know Riot really kind of steered away from, which I think is just such a wasted opportunity. Obviously, there is some sort of implication as to balance, but if Riot could find a way to essentially change the way these events can trigger or change the way they sort of work in order to say, you know, these can't trigger in ranked and these can't trigger in pro play, but, you know, normals go nuts. Being able to have more things like the Rengar versus Kha'Zix quest or the Three Sisters quest, adding more of those to the game are huge ways of expanding the thematics of the game and expanding the story, because especially there are a lot of rivalries that I feel like a lot of players don't necessarily know exist. Things like Jace and Victor, for example. A lot of players may not know about that, or Seraphine Skarner. I know it's a bit of a meme, but having a Seraphine Skarner quest, that could be super interesting, and that could be a really unique way of sort of letting players know, hey, there's a story hook here. You know, these characters interact with each other. These characters have beef with each other, maybe, and being able to say, you know, oh, I didn't know that, but this random event happened in game, and now I do. That's a really cool emergent way that Riot can do gameplay and story at the same time. Obviously, an even harder way to do this would be to take a lot of the featured game modes that Riot used to make, things like Ascension or the Project game mode, or even doing like the PvE game modes like Star Guardian Invasion and Odyssey Extraction, but doing them for canon events, I think would be a huge way for Riot to continue to tell the story going forwards. And I don't think you even have to say, you know, like these are very regionalized events, because we had, you know, in Shadows Linger, we had a canonical team up of Misfortune, Lucian, Olaf, and Alawi dealing with a Harrowing, right? Which are very, very unique and different champions that come from different backstories and have different playstyles. And that's an easy way for Riot to be able to say, you know, oh, well, we can do an event where these or a PvE game mode where you play as these characters, and you can even build it out further from there depending on the scope you want to go for. A Noxus versus Ionia PvE game mode, for example, where you play as the Ionian defenders. Well, you have a ton of Ionians to pick from. You could say, you know, oh, well, Olaf happens to be there searching for his glorious death, so that's why he's a playable character. You could even say something like Aatrox is there because he happened to wash up on Ionia, so that's why he's an antagonist for the players to deal with. There's so many options for Riot to sort of flesh out these game modes, and instead of doing a PvE game mode that is unconnected from the lore but still has a story to it, they can actually do a game mode that has story connection, and that would be really, really cool to see. Again, I know that those sorts of game modes are not easy for Riot to produce, but knowing that they are a possibility, I think, would be a big deal going forward for Riot. So either way, I've made this video long enough. I've rambled on for long enough, but let me know what you think of any of these ideas down in the comment section below. If you would like to see them in-game, if you would like to see Riot devote some time and energy to developing them, let me know all of that. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts, especially if, you know, if you guys think it's a good idea. If you guys don't think it would be a good idea, let me know all of that. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed the video today, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.